All right, did you get a request to record?
Yeah, I think you started recording, so it should be
Okay,
fine.
so we're good. All right. So I've got Coach Dylan here, and we're gonna go through a couple of questions on how we both actually kind of started playing sports and what it took us to get through high school and into college, and then how we kind of progressed out of that, and then all in the kind of terms of strength conditioning training, and then we'll go through some of the biggest things that we now know that either we would have changed back then or that we were able to utilize during our training, and then just kind of any other thoughts that we have as we go through it. So the first thing that we're going to both talk about is, what did it take to get ready for your high school sport? So where did you play, Dylan, and how good were you guys?
Depends who you ask, I guess.
Yeah.
So for high school soccer, all around. So specifically for high school, um, we did a lot of what happened was and I think it still happens a lot now, is typically the kids that you don't play, a lot of coaches don't play you until you're upperclassmen, unless you're like super athletic from a freshman, or from your freshman year on. You don't get that much playing time. Obviously, it depends on the style of coach, but with high school coaches specifically, that tends to be the case, and that's usually because the older kids, bigger, faster, stronger, so you need to be able to a deal with that, but also you're going to be more effective. Like one of the kids I played with grew up playing with him, and he was the only kid in our freshman class to get playing time our freshman year, and he was the most athletic out of all of us. He was good from a technical standpoint too, but athletically he was pretty phenomenal from that standpoint. And he was just a kid that stuck
Stood
out in
out.
coach's eyes and was able to make a difference and kind of hang with the pack until the rest of us kind of caught up and matured over the next year,
So when did you catch up?
like junior year. And you get a little bit of exposure like sophomore year, but still, and I remember having the conversation with another one of the coaches, and he's like, what you need to do is give these younger kids that are more talented group of players, like all together, like with the way our school was, Lyman Hall and Sheehan being separated. So the team I grew up playing with, like we were really good from that standpoint, but then we broke apart. So you have this really good class coming into high school, and what I don't think was done well was give us enough exposure. So by the time we got to our junior and senior year, like we kind of underperformed because we made it to like the state semifinals one year and lost a game that we probably shouldn't have lost or whatever. And then sophomore year, my senior year, we didn't lose a game until the state tournament, the conference tournament, and then the state tournament. Like we won, I don't know, whatever games unbeaten, 15, 16, and then we lost 2 games in a row and our game was over. Our season was over. And it's just like, we didn't have that exposure, I think, to the high school level until our junior year, some of us.
So sounds like from a team component, it was you wish they kind of did a better job of getting you guys as a unit and bringing you up and getting you more exposure earlier on, as opposed to just kind of waiting for you to eventually like physically mature and hope that that also brought like the tactical side with it as well.
Yeah, the tactical and just like the readiness for the sport itself. I mean, technically we were better than the teams, but physically it was just these other kids were playing a bit at that level, that faster level, I think, before we were.
So what kind of stuff did you do to get ready for then the high school soccer seasons?
I think a lot of it was just those captain practices run by the seniors or whatever, the captains basically, but the upperclassmen. And then I remember we practiced at the fields, and there was like these like woods and trails by the fields, and then after, like, there's times we just like ran on through the woods for practice, and you're like, we gonna touch the ball here? And we're just running through the, like, 3 mile jogs through the woods, and you're just like, what the heck is going on here?
Okay. So really it was just playing and sometimes running. It wasn't a ton
Yeah.
of like any specific stuff. It wasn't any real lifting or any stuff like that, right?
We didn't lift. I mean, we did like body weight stuff, like push-ups. I remember, like, the big thing was after every practice we had to do 100 push-ups before we could leave, unless we did like really well. And you're just like, is this preparing me that much or whatever? And then it was interesting. And then, like, during the season, like when our coach was actually allowed to coach us, um, we did like just circuit training kind of around the field. Or it wasn't even circuit training, some of it. It was just like run around until basically I say stop. like as fast as you make it around this whole field as fast as you can, and whatever. 2 minutes later, we'll see how it goes. But like I remember for tryouts was, and from my freshman year onwards, it got like easier and easier because it was like hell week. And then like I think the first year we tried, my freshman year going in, it was like 7 days. The next year it was like 6 to 5. Then it was like 3, and then the next it was like two or one day.
Did you guys have any tests you had to perform to see if you would make varsity or like JV or anything?
Kind of, but everyone was kind of fit enough to like we had to run from the fields to our coach's house, and we did a bunch of stuff at the coach's house, like up a hill. Like we did like weird circuits, we're flipping tires and stuff up the hill, and then we ran back, had lunch, and then we just did more fitness like at the like for the next hour or two at the fields, and then like the last hour, like I remember my freshman year especially, the last hour, 2 to 3 or 3 to 4, whatever it was, and we started at 8 or 9. We've like did a scrimmage, small side scrimmage, and like people couldn't string together 2 passes. And I remember like my legs, I just felt like there was bricks strapped to them, and everyone had to feel the same way. It was like you couldn't complete a 5-yard pass. Like you physically, you're just like, I don't have this in me right now. It's like, and you're like, are we gonna be good? Like I don't know. This is interesting, and I think some colleges do that stuff too still.
Well, I mean, so kind of transition then. So you finished high school, you didn't really have too much. It doesn't sound like you had too much of a plan. You guys kind of relied on talent, and then hopefully, as you got older and matured physically, you guys had some athletic ability. I mean, I think playing sport develops that, but it wasn't like you maybe maximized your ability by using like weights or training effectively. So it was kind of like flying by the seat of your pants almost. And you guys got lucky with that. You had a good enough team and a fit enough team to kind of overcome some stuff, but not enough to maybe perform at the level you guys probably should have in terms of like winning a championship.
Yeah, I definitely don't think most of us reached our athletic ceiling or potential. We had a good we had some like decent athletic kids. We had
How many kids on your team went and played in college senior year?
From my high school, I think two, just two, I think. For my senior class, I mean, there's only 6 of us maybe, so 2 out of 6, and then from the other high school that I played with, like in the spring, or whatever, when we were out of high school, this is like probably the same thing, 3, 2, 3, 4. Like my main core team or whatever, that we were mixed between like 3 different grades, probably like 8 or 9.
Yeah.
But like a bunch of the kids that I played with could have gone to college and played, but a lot of them went to like bigger schools. That like they wouldn't have been able to cut it at like a high D level.
Right.
Thousands and thousands of kids. But like some, D3, D2, they would have been fine.
Yeah. All right. And then so you finish high school, go to college. Would you notice a difference between transitioning between the fitness level and the play at high school to the college setting?
You're playing against grown men.
Yeah.
So from like not even like the game itself standpoint, like that stuff was completely different. The level, the technique. You got kids playing from all over the world, Europe, Canada, South America. So not even the technical side of things was just like a lot to catch up to. But from a physical standpoint, everything, like these guys, like you're playing against 25, 26-year-olds, and you're 18.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's not the norm, but it is pretty pretty frequent that you're playing against people that are 4 or 5 years older than you.
No, I remember I went in there to Keene as a freshman, and we had one guy that was 24 and another one that was 22, and the other guy as a sophomore was 21. So, like, yeah, I agree. I'm like, wow, you're 6 feet and like 200 pounds, and I'm 5'10", 155, 165. This is gonna be fun.
Yeah, one of the like freshmen that came in with me was 26, I think, 27, and you're just like, what?
Yeah.
Guy from England, or whatever. So I mean, there's just so many factors. It's like to prepare for that environment, you have to really take it as much advantage of your athletic abilities and try to get your ceiling as high as you can. So when you get to that level, you're prepared. And I think at like pro levels, you look at players that come in to like pro level teams, and they're playing. I mean, they're playing against you're 19, playing against people that are all the way up to 35, and they've been doing it for 15 years. And some of these people do really well, and they're usually the ones that are pretty darn athletic. or on the complete opposite end of this. I mean, to make it that level, you got to be really athletic anyway. But those people that are just extremely fast, strong, like they have that ability to make an impact, even though like the football brain isn't really there all that yet. The same thing, pretty similar with
So
college.
from a college standpoint, did you guys start actually lifting a lot more, and did that make a difference? And also from a conditioning standpoint, do you think it got better with more structure and stuff like that, or was it still kind of a wild west?
My freshman year into my sophomore year, we transitioned. They just hired like a part-time strength coach. So I remember the year before, the guys used to say like they just kind of went into the weight room and they had kind of did whatever. So it's kind of a free for all. But after that, like my freshman year, from freshman to sophomore year, the strength coach got a whole new facility in and stuff like that. So he completely remodeled the whole weight room we had, and he did a really good job programming stuff. And luckily our coach he's bought into it. He's like, yeah, like this is your area of expertise. Like, go ahead, whatever. And I think a lot of coaches kind of try to overshadow too much on it. Like they overshadow the strength coach and try to control it when they don't really know what they're talking about. And I remember like in the spring we just went like heavy all the time, and you're like, we lifted Tuesday and Thursday, and like I was sore for like 3 days in a row. Like after we did like deadlifts and sprints, and then like the practice the next day, I'm like, how am I supposed to run around right now? So gradually, I think we gradually could have increased the tempo of those types of things, so we weren't just like
Thrown
dead.
into it.
Yeah. But we never really lifted much in the season just because it's a really short season, and it's just like it's how do you make the time for it? And then you're trying to catch back up in the spring, and you only have a couple months before people go home in the summer, and then a lot of people, what are they doing in the summer? You know what I mean?
And as a sport in general, do you think soccer has kind of figured out how to actually utilize the weight room into training and concepts better or no?
I guess it depends on the area. I mean, the U.S. kind of sucks from a soccer standpoint.
Yeah.
I don't know what they're doing in Europe, or at top level clubs, but I think some of the academies and stuff that are doing well over here, not like the academies like Oakwood and stuff like that, but I think the branches underneath like MLS teams or like
Yeah.
XL teams, I think they're starting to implement those types of things. I think you see it a lot with other governing bodies of like the sports in the U.S., like hockey, like the NHL and stuff like that.
So what was the timeline of freshman high school soccer to the end of your college career?
Like 2012 to 2018, 2019.
All right. And biggest thing you dealt with the whole time was pretty much your knees?
Towards the end, yeah.
Yeah.
I never really had any injuries except for those overuse ones. And like Mike Boyle was talking about the conditioning stuff. I was watching his thing today, and he's like all these itises and overuse things. He's like they weren't really around when I was growing up, and then it was when all these long, slow distance aerobic training guys came in. All of a sudden, people, plantar fasciitis, they got tendonitis in their knees and stuff like that, which was interesting because it's like a lot of that stuff is too much volume. So it's like because we trained like that. I thought that was the way we needed to train, so I continued to do it at the time until I learned more. And then all of a sudden, I think it starts to catch back up to you, and now all of a sudden, everything hurts.
Yeah.
Everything you're trying to do because you kind of broke yourself down so much. Train like that's when the simple to put it is work smart, not hard, or work hard, but yeah, work smart at the same time.
So I remember my freshman year was 1998 was the start of it. and then and we had a full squad for our freshman team. So we had, I think, 14 kids on our freshman team. And like similar to you, we had been playing since we were like 6. So we were very good. We had 3 kids that actually played on varsity and actually got some playing time. And again, they were the fastest, like very technically good kids on our team. And then that sophomore year, all of us went up to varsity for a little bit, played a little bit of JV. And then by junior year, all of us were on varsity, either starting or at least coming off the bench pretty quickly. And I remember the same thing. We only had CAMS practices pretty much that got us ready for the summer. And that was good. We also had one of our coaches was very pretty good at keeping up with some of the running concepts and stuff like that. So we actually did a little bit more of almost like a track program. So we had a little more structure, but we also played some short-sided games and then we'd run. But I think the biggest part was, I don't even know if we like most teams have anymore, is like our captains and upperclassmen were actually really good leaders, right? They actually like kind of got us together and got us to train pretty hard. So we were physically fit. For our team, we had to run the 1.5 miles, and you had to make it under 9.5 to play on varsity, and you had to make it under 10 to play on JV. And the piece of that is just like, again, sometimes we'd go for these long distance runs, which isn't the end of the world, but we probably spent maybe too much time building up some of that aerobic system as opposed to working more on max speed or developing some different qualities in terms of our capacity. But then we, as juniors, we won the Housatonic division, which I don't even know if it's still around. And then as seniors, when I was a senior, we made it to the semifinals of the state and lost in double overtime PKs. And again, the same thing, like nobody ever was, we went in the weight room like maybe once, or kids maybe lifted on their own, but it was always just like, hey, I'm going to bench press, I'm going to do rows and stuff like that. There wasn't really any good training concepts. And I think with the kids that we had, like 2 kids that actually did lift pretty religiously, and they were physically like much bigger than everybody else. And I think if we were able to get more of our teammates somewhere better, closer to that capacity, I mean, that's, I think, would have changed a lot of our ability to like compete with other teams that might have just had bigger kids in general, but also we would have been faster and stronger to be able to win 50-50 balls more often, especially for like, you know, if you have like a sophomore playing on a varsity team, the confidence level also is like isn't there, right? And a kid that then trains, that gets stronger and faster, all of a sudden that probably goes up much higher, which could mean the difference of like him winning a ball that gets him into a scoring position, or losing it and then countering and like getting scored on, and then you guys lose the game. So I think it was like it's a drastically overlooked component of just like confidence in more of a how do you bring up the whole team as opposed to like, oh, we just got a faster team. And then we had two or three kids go play at college. Again, same thing. We probably could have had like 3 or 4 if they didn't go to a bigger school. And then when I got to college, it was a mile test, a 2-mile test, and I think there was like one other thing. And I remember that first week of just basically being there and then going back to my dorm room and putting ice bags on my shins because they hurt so bad and I couldn't walk. And that's the same thing. Like you walk out on like the third practice of the day and you're kind of like gingerly trotting around because your crap hurts so much. And it starts to like when you start to warm up and you start moving again, and then you go back, and as soon as you slow down, you're just like, oh my God, I think someone took a sledgehammer to my whole body. And again, we didn't have, so this is 2002. They had just redone our facility for the student population for the gym, and they had a strength coach, but we weren't required to go to her. She didn't hold really any sessions. She gave us programs to do, but we would have to go ask her for help or to do stuff. There was never like anything actual organized. And it wasn't until I was a junior or senior, I can't remember which, when I stopped playing soccer and I was fully in the health science program and actually going towards strength conditioning, that I put together a program and had the team come in and lift, doing some of the stuff that we had designed for them. So there was never like any real, we did a couple of agility sessions once in a while, but that was about it during the off season. There was never really any main program, even though our coach at the time, who was, I want to say he was like 65 or 70, was able to bench press like his body weight for like reps and believed in like strength training and all stuff, but never actually put together a program for us to do. And after my sophomore year, when I herniated the disc in my back and I was like, screw this, I'm not playing soccer anymore because it's just making it worse. And the athletic training staff at the time kept telling me it was my hamstrings, which was not the case. that's when all of a sudden I switched completely to doing something different. And I think that had we had a better kind of program in place with training me in high school and then into college, I don't think I would have gotten myself as jacked up as I did, which was very painful for a long time. Luckily, I didn't have surgery, but it was the start of being like, oh, there's probably a better way to do this. So thinking about all that stuff now, what's the biggest change you've made in your training in general?
I think as I learned more while I was at school, it changed from like, that bodybuilder style to more athletic based, strength based. Like you stand there. It's funny, like you walk by the weight room now and the guys go in there for like that accessory workout. They're doing the lateral raises and the bicep curls or whatever. And then you're like, oh, when it comes to, we need to go in and lift. They're like, oh, I don't want to trap bar deadlift or I don't want to squat or whatever. It's even stuff out in the field that we started to implement this year with some of the, like, they're like, yo, you need to make the warm up shorter. And a lot of it was just athletic movements to get them ready for the thing. And like, that was 10 minutes. And they wanted me to do 12 to 15, like the head coaches. And that's all that's all we need. We just work on a little bit of ability stuff like low level plyos. And I had kind of like collaborated with the GA and the other strength coach, like, hey, like what, like this is what you guys want done in the weight room. Like, what else can we do out on the field to kind of cover some of this stuff? And we all kind of collaborated, and we're like, yeah, let's do this. So just switching from more of like a sport performance based style of training, which I think is what helps keep you healthy, but also help you perform better. Because like do all the bicep curls, like go ahead, do them, whatever. But like that shouldn't be the main part of why you're going into the weight room.
Why do you think soccer is so late to catch up on this stuff?
So I feel like they think the physical side of like when you look at the U.S. like model of development for a player, and even just like the soccer player in general, there's 4 parts. It's the tactical, the technical, the psychological, and then the physical. And like the physical one is neglected so much because I think they don't really understand the importance, but they think you can just get by on the technical and tactical side of things, or they have a misconception of what that physical thing is. Like they don't really know. Like you look, what needs to be done is like a needs analysis, which is just like looking at what like the biomechanical things of
model
to be done, and then just like the energy systems that are being used and stuff like that. And they don't really have an idea, I think, of what is being used. Like you look at, like just look at the way people train their athletes from like the sport coach wise for soccer, and it's like go run a couple laps or whatever, or go run 3 miles to stay fit, and then it's like you get into the sport and it doesn't look like that. It's
no.
A lot of sprinting or like just below a sprint, and then like just above a walk jog, and like it's just kind of it's variable, but I like think those are the 2 more popular sides of the spectrum. And I just don't think people understand that enough, because like all you have to do is tell us, like the soccer coach, hey, watch one of your athletes, watch one of your really good players, and just watch them the entire game and see what they do, like from a movement standpoint. And then they're like, oh, they're not jogging the whole time. And it's just like a big thing is like common sense. Like Mike Boyle was saying today, like common sense isn't so common from like that standpoint. He's like, just watch a player and just time how fast, like put a timer on every time they run. See, like, is it 10 seconds or whatever, and then how long do they rest? And why not just train your athletes like that?
I think what's hard is even like, I mean, think about with yourself too, is sometimes you don't feel like you're doing work until you're like huffing and puffing and sweating. And you're almost like, oh, well, is this actually having the effect I need it to have to create an adaptation? And I think what's hard about that is we also get that ingrained in that, like, oh, unless you're really grinding, you're not working hard enough to beat the next player. But in reality, what that might actually look like is I need you to go full intensity on this sprint for maybe 10 seconds and then go rest for 2 minutes, right? Yeah. And actually fully recover so you can then repeat that again. And that doesn't look like this, oh man, I'm sweating buckets and I'm constantly moving and doing all these cool things. But to your point, it's simple and it actually mirrors what's happening on the field, and you're building up now this engine that should be able to replicate what you need it to do, as opposed to, well, we're just gonna beat ourselves up doing all this conditioning, which then might lead to what we were talking about earlier, this like tendonitis or some kind of overuse issue, which I think about like what we've done in the facility, in that just seeing the improvement in people doing 10-second sprints on the woodways 3 times a training session times a week. And they're like, oh yeah, my mile time went down. Like, yeah, you don't have to like run a mile every time. You can just work
Yeah.
on this high end stuff and be fine. Or you know what, go for a walk, right? Because you're gonna be doing that in the game anyways.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and I think a big thing too with a lot of the coaches is they just do what they did when they were like when they grew up playing. Which obviously the research and just the overall training knowledge wasn't as good as it is now. So they just like, oh, it worked for me. Like I was a good player or whatever. I was fit. Like yada yada. It'll work for this. It's just the game continues to evolve. Like they talk about comparing players like now to players like 20, 30, 40 years ago, and you're like, no,
yeah,
the now is so much faster.
yeah.
Not from a technical and tactical side of things, but like you have better athletes.
Well, I mean, think about like a player that maybe was 150 pounds back then. These guys are now like 170 or 160, even 160 or 165. That 10 pounds or 20 pounds makes a huge difference in terms of like the physicality and also then being able to put power on shots or power on passes and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I was also, what just popped in my head too was the idea that uh, I saw a drastic change in my own play because after college, I didn't play. I stopped playing soccer my sophomore year in college, and then all of a sudden I picked it back up playing indoor with a bunch of guys that played at Bentley, and I had started to lift, like you said, for performance and for strength, and all of a sudden I went up to 175, and that was a very different situation for me in terms of playing. So I noticed how much different it was to play with not only better players but also being heavier and stronger and faster. I was like, oh man, this is like so much easier, right? Like I wasn't just getting knocked off the ball all the time. So like I think until someone experiences the difference of being like, well, yeah, I did this how I got here, right? But they never have changed or tried to improve themselves in that other realm. They don't really have any representation to look at to be like, oh yeah, now I know why it's important, which is hard.
Yeah, I think so. For me, I had to do a lot of work from a technical side as well. So I'm like my freshman year, terrible. Sophomore year was about the same, and then I remember being in my coach's office at the end of my sophomore year, basically on the chopping block, and then I had a really good sophomore spring. Like I just felt like everything kind of caught up or was catching up. I wasn't totally caught up, but I literally looked at them when I was in like the one-on-one meeting. I was like, this has been like my first semester where I've actually felt like I've started to belong. Because all the like my freshman year, you just like, holy crap, like what am I doing here? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And because it was such a higher level than I was used to, and then we started to actually listen. I started to actually kind of listen to the way the strength coach was kind of programming some of the stuff, and then I added in from like a different coach's program while I wasn't doing that stuff, like during the winter and stuff. Which looking back now, like it's not the best coach in the world, but it was a lot better than what lifting like a bodybuilder. It was that overtime athletes, that guy down in Florida or whatever, and it was just there was a lot of athletic movement stuff based within the lift, so it got me stronger, and gradually, it just helped me kind of be a little bit more impactful on the field, I guess, and then catching up from the technical side of things to actually be able to stand my own ground, was probably a big difference there too. And then continuing to do that stuff from my sophomore transitioning, and then junior to senior year because it progressed better.
Yeah. What from a nutrition standpoint, what do you think has been the biggest change for you?
I think, um, I don't know. I felt like my nutrition was always pretty good in college. From what I
It
did.
was it was better than what I would say the majority of college kids eat. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. But just understanding the relationship and the importance of the food that you're eating and being able to actually perform. Um, because I remember like and from a training standpoint too, if you're trying to get stronger and put on a little bit of weight, like you need to make sure you're giving yourself the amount of calories and energy to be able to do so. Because I remember in high school, like I started lifting like my junior year, but like almost like just threw away time in the bucket because I wasn't eating enough. Like, oh, why aren't I getting any bigger? Why aren't I getting that much stronger? It's like you're exercising more and taking in about the same, and all I was focused on was like how do I get protein in, and it was just like finding all these they weren't like lean sources. It was like literally looking at like snack bars. And, oh, it's just 4 grams. And the other thing that's 3 or whatever. And then you're like, oh, how can I add in a protein bar? It's like, why don't you just focus on like I gradually from like my junior year to like now and through college was eating more whole food based, as opposed to like the processed stuff that comes in a package.
I think I remember it was my sophomore year and I was taking my first nutrition class and we had to do a 3-day food analysis. And this is back before you could have like an app. And you had to plug all this in food into a computer database and then it would spit out all this information. And I got like this 4-page food analysis and it showed all of my like vitamin mineral levels were like low and my sodium content was like through the roof. And it was just like, it was abysmal. Like if you like, I mean, I remember actually being in high school and one of my good friends who was an All-American swimmer was our junior year in college, I think, he was being put on blood pressure medication, right? And it's like, how is that happening when this person is that physically fit? And I remember like uh, being in college playing sports and just being like, man, I'm tired all the time, or like I'm not seeing the gains that I want after training. And it comes to find out like you eat all the stuff in the dining hall and like you're having soda or you're having fried foods or you're always getting the same stuff and I'm eating Cocoa Pebbles for breakfast and like maybe I'll have a piece of fruit and stuff like that. And as soon as I was like, you know what, I'm going to try to add in a salad a day. Now, granted, it had like a lot of like dressing on it, but I all of a sudden was like, oh, I feel better. Like I just having like actually the right stuff at the right time makes a huge difference in a lot of these cases.
Yeah, and I mean, I think now as a college athlete and knowing the amount, like from my teammates' perspective, like we all knew the amount of like, especially during preseason, like the amount of energy you're expending, and
Yeah.
just like I can eat whatever. Like I'm young, I'm an athlete. Like I'm not gonna get fat, and that's the main thing. Is like, oh, can it hurt my performance that much? And for some people, maybe not. That comes down to genetics. But then from a physique standpoint, because there was one of the guys I played with was absolute beast, like ripped. And he would eat like I look at his plate when we go to the dining hall after, and there's like 10 chocolate chip cookies on there, and I'm like, how do you do that? Like what? So genetically, like he was fine, but he was chronically injured.
Well,
Um,
so that's the thing too. Is I remember.
string or whatever. And I remember my I think my senior year, I went out, like we go out early for practice, whatever. People kind of stroll out, and I sat down and started doing like 90-90 breathing on the bench. And he looks at me and he's like, "What the heck are you doing?" And then some people were talking. He's like, "You know what? I'm gonna start doing what Dylan's doing because he never gets injured. I'm always injured." Like that would be smart.
Well, so I remember. I remember we were it was exercise fitness testing, and we were learning how to do body composition testing. So we had the calipers, and I was the guinea pig for that in all of our classes. So, the calipers showed that I was at 7% body fat. And like, again, you look at the nutrition I was eating, like this thing just told me that I'm like deprived of all these vitamins and minerals. I'm super high in like carbohydrates and sodium and all this other stuff. And you're like, well, that doesn't make sense. Look look at how his body shows. And, I think on the outside, you're kind of like, oh yeah, it's obviously it works. But on the inside, like you don't know, right? Like you could have all kinds of stuff starting to shut down to some degree. It may not show up right away in performance, but like you think about some of these people, like maybe it shows up in injuries or maybe it shows up in other ways where all of a sudden you're like, I don't know, like you could be way better if your nutrition's better too. You don't know.
Yeah, and I remember in my first nutrition class that I took, I think we were talking about like the vitamins and minerals and all that stuff, and people are like, "Oh, you'll get more energy from it." Like, you don't get energy from that stuff, but that stuff brings you up to like an optimal level. Like this is how you
Yeah.
should be performing, and people are like, and like realizing that now, like you might be performing really well, like some of the guys I played with, but the thing they're like, "Oh, I'm good." Like, A, why do I need to look after my nutrition, or like B, why do I need to strength train? Like I'm already good. It's
Yeah.
like, yeah, but you could be better. Like
Yeah.
why? Why is that hard to understand? And they just like, oh, like this'll suffice for now, and then whatever they get injured or whatever. Like some of the more talented players, aside from like contact injuries, which there's only so much you can do. Like the ones that they got like chronic overuse injuries, it was like, A, your nutrition I know isn't that great because I see it, or B, it was like you just don't. I know you don't. You skip the lifts, or when you come in from the summer, because like I said, you can't make the guys do whatever in the summer. Like they're all over the world, so it's like you don't have that much control. Who knows what they have access to? They come in and they're not physically ready for the demands of the sport, because the college season, like you got your 2 weeks of preseason, 1 week of preseason, and you get right into your season, and it's like you're playing every 3 days, and the demand that puts on players' bodies, it's like people are sore. For you play a game Wednesday, people are sore Thursday, a little bit Friday. You can't do too much intense training with the starting lineup because of that, and then you got a game on Saturday, and it's just like you got to constantly recover as fast as you can to be able to play, and then if you can't handle that, then like, ooh, are you useful?
Well, it's funny, and we'll probably end on this note here. Is I remember being at Keene, and our fastest guy was our forward, but he was, again, kind of didn't eat well, didn't really train except for in practice, was very kind of lackadaisical in terms of even then like practicing, and would always end up with like a hamstring strain, right? And this guy's only tool was speed, and he would always come up lame after like a game or two because he pulled his hamstring. And his rehab process was just to go to the athletic trainer and get some stim and ice, and then be like, oh yeah, I gotta sit out practice for a couple times. Yeah. And then I look at some of the other kids on the team that were physically fit and like actually lifted, and I don't remember them really being, like you're saying, like nearly beat up as much and having all these little other kind of nagging stuff. And like you could sit there and be like, all right, well, there's a ton of factors that go into this, but I think the main piece is like, all right, adding strength to a system is hugely important to like improving all facets. Adding a better fuel source improves all facets, right? And then if we wanted to get into recovery at some point too, like those three things, they are the foundation of everything you're going to do. And to your point, why would you not want to get better at that stuff? Not only is it going to make you probably much better on the field, but it makes it much easier too, right? Yeah. If you're not fighting against yourself all the time. So any other comments to finish out?
No, I forgot about this before when we were talking about the high school stuff, and it kind of portrays to now. Like I don't know, like some of the more intimidating or better teams when I was in high school was like I remember like playing at Suffield, and people like they won like 40-something games in a row. Like they played whatever teams around them that they played might have been not that good, but when we played them and other times where there's a state tournament like outside of high school, people are always like, "What do they feed those kids?" Because they were huge. And same thing with like I remember Amity, Cheshire my freshman year, and not Shelland. Who else? Madison, Hand. Like these kids were massive, and like they were the better teams. So like talk about whatever you want, like technical, like from technical wise, like they could have been better. And it's the high school game, it's the high school game. But like if you have that base, and then you can improve. Like it's easier, I think, to improve that the technical side of things if you already have that
physical base.
Athletic base, yeah. And then from an injury standpoint, like I don't remember many of the kids in college that were, solid and strength wise. Like they didn't skip lifts, they did what they were supposed to do, and their nutrition might not have been like out of this world, but it was a lot better than something like the person I was talking about before. It's like enough, like they did like enough to be whatever. Maybe they were 60-40, 70-30 as opposed to like I don't know 30-70. Like I don't remember them getting hurt that much, or if they did, it was like something minor. And they were the stronger players that played more too, and they just they were consistently able to go out and play and deal with whatever kind of was thrown at them.
And show up.
Yeah.
All right, man. Good chat. We will do another one soon.
All right. Thank you, sir. Adios.